Imagine the pressure. The owners of a new venue sunk millions of dollars into refurbishing a rundown pub on the south side of Brisbane. The venue was filled with 4 levels of multi-purpose function rooms, which was an impressive feat at the time. We'd been tasked with filling the venue for every Friday and Saturday night throughout the calendar year. It was our first big attempt at entering the realm of event venue marketing, and we couldn't afford to turn this opportunity down. So, by the way, today's date marks the 8th of February. Raise your hands if you have an event venue. Great, there's a few. And keep your hands up if you've filled your venue for every Friday and Saturday night throughout the rest of this calendar year. Well, today I'm going to show you how we made this happen for the Fox Hotel. Now, this project came with a few challenges. Firstly, the venue was situated on the south side of Brisbane CBD, and this was not a destination for functions and events at the time. Secondly, the previous brand had been trashed through its association with cheap food specials and cheap drink offers. And if anyone in this room is from Brisbane, you might remember the infamous $2 steaks at the Fox Hotel. So, feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the task that we had at hand, we had to settle on a 5-step blueprint to make this happen. Now, the blueprint that we came up with was very simple, and you've probably seen similar models in the past. And that's okay. But what's important here is the creative approach that's applied to every step along the way. So we begin our campaign by looking for niche event types that suit the venue. And we work out what audiences match up with those event types. We then make sure we have powerful content that captures the attention of our audience. And we amplify that to tens of thousands of people who are in the market for an event venue. We then have key landing pages, and we optimize those to make sure we get as many inquiries as possible. And we use retargeting to re-engage with anybody who's been looking at our website so that we can help bring them back and finish off that inquiry process. So when it comes to event venue marketing, there's a handful of event types that are highly competitive. And this is because it's the most obvious place to start. We began our campaign for this Fox Hotel targeting these 4 key event types, including conferences, weddings, birthdays, and cocktail parties. It didn't take long before we realized that the campaign just wasn't working. The owners of the venue were applying pressure to us, and we had to find a way to make this work. So one of my colleagues at the time was in the process of planning her wedding. And she was struggling to come to terms with the fact that the average Australian wedding costs $36,000. And this is a huge amount of money to hand over at the drop of a hat for a wedding. So she was hunting around on Google for affordable wedding packages. And at the time, there were none to be found. So I suggested sneakily that perhaps she could host her wedding at the Fox Hotel. She wasn't so keen on the idea. And it took a little bit of convincing from the rest of the team. They decided that maybe she could host it on one of the off-peak event nights, and they might be able to cut her a little deal. So after a bit of convincing from the rest of the team, they actually encouraged her to host this event at the Fox Hotel, and they managed to do it for an affordable price. So we learnt something really important out of this process, that we thought at the time we'd discovered a gap in the market. So we decided to set up a campaign targeting affordable weddings. And it didn't take long before we had a steady income or steady stream of brides flowing in the door, searching for affordable wedding packages. It was hugely successful, and we learned some key notes along the way. What we learned is that everybody has a different perception of what the word affordable really means. For some brides, an affordable wedding was $10,000, and for others, an affordable wedding was $20,000. So all of a sudden, we had a steady stream of brides who were willing to meet the minimum spends for our venue, despite the fact that we coined the term affordable weddings. So the campaign was working, and we decided to look for other gaps in the market. We hunted down different event types, including engagement parties. Then we honed in on specific milestone events, 21st birthdays, 30th birthdays, and 50ths. We also chose to hone in on certain types of hens parties, and these don't include the ones that contain those phallic-shaped objects. It didn't take long before we had a steady stream of new inquiries coming in from people hunting for those niche event types. And we witnessed tremendous year-on-year growth from this campaign. We matched these event types up with relevant audiences, and we looked around on our social channels to find the right audiences that would match these event types. We used 5 major demographic filters to get in front of these people. The first of these demographics includes their age, and we discovered that we were dealing with predominantly millennials, aged between 25 and 35. The gender was really key to the success of this campaign, as we were mostly targeting females who are the primary decision maker for most of these event types, especially when we look at weddings and engagement parties. The location played a key role in this campaign, especially when we're targeting corporates within the local area. And the relationship status of the people that we were targeting was also a key role for our engagement parties and our weddings. The employment industry that people had included people such as bankers, real estate agents, IT consultants. And in the lead up to the festive season, these key audiences played a key role in generating our Christmas parties. So we had our campaign up and running, and it didn't take long before we had tremendous growth in the overall inquiry rate for our venue. We witnessed huge year-on-year growth to the point where the venue was generating over 300 inquiries every single month. These inquiries led to huge amounts of revenue for the business. And after 4 years of running this campaign, the venue sold for an absolute fortune. It's safe to say that the owner of the venue was incredibly happy with the success of our campaign. They moved on to their next project and referred us on to some of the largest hospitality operations in the country. And from this point, we now work with over 100 event venues across Australia. Powerful content that hooks in the attention of the audience is key to our campaign's success. Now, you've probably heard over and over again that content is king, and for us, this is true. However, content for us also plays the role of the Queen and the Joker. And this is because we have a number of tricks up our sleeve when it comes to content marketing. Now, a content schedule is a very simple process. It's usually a list of blog articles or ideas that are relevant to your event type. For example, you could write an article that features 10 brilliant Christmas party ideas for 2019. And on the screen is an example of an article that's generating or being read by over 1,200 people every single month. And the types of people who are reading this are most likely in the early stages of planning their Christmas party. On the other hand, you could write an article about hens party ideas for the classy hen's bride-to-be. And this is another example of a venue that we're working with on the Gold Coast. And this article is being read by 1,300 people every single month. And all of these people are likely to be in the early stages of planning a hen's party. Now, alternatively, you could think outside the square. And you could build a micro-publication. And on the screen is an example of a micro-publication that we built for the seaside town of Port Macquarie. The goal of this publication was to raise awareness of events happening in the local area. And what we did is we wrote articles about major seasonal events, including Melbourne Cup and New Year's Eve. And we intertwined these with articles about things to do in the local area. These included articles such as Port's best beaches and some of the best restaurants in Port Macquarie. Now, for New Year's Eve, we put together a roundup of the best events happening in the local area. We optimized this article for search engines so that if anyone was looking for the best events happening in the area on New Year's Eve, they'd be able to find this article very easily. The article received tremendous growth throughout the month of December. It was read by over 4,000 people, which is actually a considerable amount of traffic when you think about how small Port Macquarie is. The article sent huge amounts of traffic through to all of the venues who were featured in the article. And for the first time in their history, they all sold out for New Year's Eve. So these are just some ideas of what you might be able to include in your content strategy. Perhaps you could think outside the square if you're struggling to generate engagement for your brand, and you could come up with something like a micro-publication. Now, would your job be easier if you could put your content in front of tens of thousands of people who are in the market for event venues? Yes. Content amplification makes this possible. Now, when we're amplifying our content across our social platforms or through Google, what we need to do is we need to segment our warm and our cold audiences, because each of these audiences are at different stages of the funnel and they need different types of communication. On the one hand, a cold audience is someone who matches the persona of our target audience, but they may never have engaged with your brand before. Now, on the other hand, a warm audience is someone who matches that profile, and they might have visited your website, they might have viewed a key landing page, or they might be signed up to your email database. And it's these audiences who are ready to make a purchase. Now, I've got some examples of how we talk to these audiences. And if the clicker wants to work, it'll show you. So for example, you could provide people with some ideas about what not to do at the next corporate Christmas party. And in this example here, we put this article out to corporates within 3 kilometres of the venue. These included people who worked in industries such as real estate. They might have been within the engineering realm, or they might have been in finance. And what you can see here is that we're not trying to make them buy anything. We're providing them with some helpful or entertaining information. And so if they click on this article and they read it, then the next time they return to their social media newsfeed will be another advertisement. And this will actually have a call to action that incentivizes them or encourages them to make an inquiry. Now, this process works really well for the venue that's featured on the screen, which is located in Paddington and Brisbane. And it's another example of how we generated tremendous year-on-year growth for another venue, to where they sold after 3 to 4 years of working on this campaign for another tremendous amount of money. And perhaps some of these ideas are things that you could incorporate into your own event marketing strategy. Now, landing pages are key to the success of all of our campaigns. And I know not everyone in this room has time to build the perfect landing page, as there's a number of elements involved. In our experience doing this for our clients, we've built literally hundreds of landing pages. And in this process, we've learned that there's 4 major items that really need to be included in every landing page. And anything else you can add is a bonus. So what we need to make sure we have is a strong headline that's relevant to the event type that we're targeting. We need to have images that capture the audience's attention. The offer and the call to action can complement each other. It's also important to make sure you've got some variation in your call to action, because millennials are so used to being bombarded with the same calls to action over and over and over again. Optimization of our landing pages is key to the success of all of our campaigns. And on the screen here, you can see an example of a page that we've optimized for this venue, another venue in Brisbane. On the left-hand side of the screen is the original example, and on the right-hand side is the optimized version. What you can see on the left is an image of a female holding a glass of champagne. This is overlaid with a headline and a byline, and if your eyesight is anything like mine, you might be struggling to read the body text. There's a button there, and when you click on that button, it opens a pop-up box where the user can proceed with their inquiry. Now, this was converting okay, 6% conversion rate at the time, but we thought we could do better. So what we did is we moved the headline and the byline above the image, and suddenly the image becomes clear. The female's actually holding a glass of champagne and she's showing off her engagement ring. We move the inquiry form to the right-hand side of the page, and it becomes very clear as to what the steps are to finish off the process of the inquiry. Now, these small changes led to a huge improvement in the overall conversion rate, jumping from 6% all the way up to 18%. And this leads to a massive amount of revenue gained when you consider the fact that the average spend on these engagement parties was $5,000 a pop. On the screen is another example of a venue that we've optimized down in Melbourne. And this is a corporate venue, and the corporate venues need slightly different styles of communication to the other party venues. So what you can see on the left-hand side of the screen is a background image of a fairly corporate-looking venue. This is overlaid with some text, which is Melbourne function rooms. Underneath there is a byline and another sentence with some buttons. What you can't see on the left-hand side is the fact that there are 6 function rooms in a waterfront location with capacity for up to 1,000 people. So our page was converting at a fairly average conversion rate, and so we had to find a way to improve the overall number of inquiries that we were receiving. So what we did is we put 3 major callouts on the page that have become very clear to the user. As you can see now on the right-hand side, there's 6 function spaces in a waterfront location, which is on the banks of the Yarra River, and the venue has capacity for up to 1,000 people. We've moved the inquiry form onto the right-hand side of the page, and it's very clear to the user what they need to do to get a copy of the function packages. Now, this inquiry rate jumped by over 100%, from 2.9% all the way up to 7.2%. And when you have a venue that has a capacity of 1,000 people, this leads to a huge amount of revenue gained. Now, the call to action alternatives can lead to a big improvement in the conversion rate. And as I said earlier, millennials are used to being bombarded with the same calls to action over and over and over again. And these are things like buy now and learn more and inquire now. And what I encourage everyone to do is to look for alternative ways that you can get the inquiries process to begin. For example, here's another venue in Melbourne. You could provide an inquiry form and give them the opportunity to request a copy of the function packages. And this is a great way of getting your foot in the door with people who are actively searching for function venues. Alternatively, if you're a wedding venue, you could get the brides to request the availability of the key dates. As with each year, most brides want to host their event on a Saturday, and there's only a very limited number of Saturdays in each year. So by putting a call to action that gets the audience to check the availability of those key dates, you might get a head start on the inquiry, and even if that date is fully booked, you might be able to move them to another day of the week. So these are just some ideas about what you can incorporate into your landing pages. And hopefully, if you include some of these elements, you might see the same success that we have. Now, how many of your website visitors are leaving your site without making an inquiry? And what if you could bring them back to your website to help finish off that process? Well, retargeting makes this possible. The process of retargeting works where if somebody visits a key landing page on your website and they close that page down without making an inquiry, then the next time they log into their social media news feed, we can have some content sitting there ready to go to help bring them back to the website and make them finish off that inquiry process. So, raise your hands if you have trouble filling Friday nights. Well, across our portfolio of event venues, we've discovered that Friday night is probably the hardest night to fill across all of our key dates. And when we had our campaign up and running for this Fox Hotel, we thought we were onto something, as we were seeing huge inquiries coming through. However, I received a call from the owner at the time who informed us that despite the huge inquiry rate that we had, we were still a long way off the target revenue. So we pulled out the calendar and had a look at the bookings, and what we could see was every Saturday night was fully booked all the way through the year, which was great. But then every Friday night was empty. So it became very clear to us that in order to reach those goals, we had to use a Friday night incentive to fill those gaps. So we used retargeting to make this happen. And some examples of this process are on the screen for you. If someone was aged 29 and whether they like it or not, their 30th birthday is on the horizon within the next 3 months, then they'd log into their newsfeed and they'd see an article that provided them with 5 excellent ideas for their 30th birthday party. If they click on this ad, read the article, and close it down, then the next time they log into their feed would be an incentive for them to host their event on a Friday night. We used a range of incentives in this process, including reduced minimum spends, cocktails on arrival, and complimentary birthday cupcakes, which worked really well for our 21st birthday parties. So these are just some ideas of what you might be able to do if you look through your booking calendar and you can spot some gaps. Now, we're all faced with projects that are underperforming or challenging. And when in these situations, what I do encourage you to do is to go back to the fundamentals. You might like to draw upon the blueprint that I've raised in this session, or something similar. But what I encourage you to do is bring your team together and initiate the discussion. Think about what it is the audience really needs. And for us, it was the brides who needed affordable wedding packages. Look for opportunities that you can use to beat the competition. For example, you might like to look at some other niche event types that are relevant to your venue. And then think outside the square when it comes to content. Perhaps if you have a brand that's underperforming with its engagement, maybe you could build a micro-publication. So if you follow the steps that I've raised here, then I look forward to hearing from you once every Friday and Saturday night is fully booked in your event schedule.